Very good.
Okay. So I'd like to call the regular Plymouth Selectboard meeting to order. Just a reminder that the special meeting is at 7 p.m. An introduction of those present. Jay Coleman.
Rick Kaminsky.
Sandy?
If you all could just say your name, please.
Oh, Mary Jane Crowdy.
Robert Craddy.
Sharon Huntley?
I'm John Kim.
Thank you. Any changes to the agenda?
No.
First on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Actually, it's before that, November 15th. Is there any discussion around the meetings?
Nope.
Notes, okay. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
They are approved. And then we'll start with mail. It's from Midge. I'm not going to read those now, but maybe I can get a copy to go. Thanks, Andy. And I'll start in the warrant while you're doing that, Rick.
Sandy, do you know what this is about from the league that Midge dropped off?
No, she dropped that off for Jay. She said she discussed some of that information with him earlier, and that was just for his
Oh, okay,
information.
very good.
And there was nothing I was going to bring to the meeting, but I thought we could discuss it at one of the upcoming ones.
Okay, great. Got it.
Trying to track down
See.
public funds, like the paper trail for the auditors. That's what it was.
Okay.
And how it's money's being invested. So you'd be giving you the folder. Hey, just curious, your road commissioner, they got a lot of, it's a lot of stuff from, it's all within budget, but that stone, they do a big project, it was like $7,000. Must have been a big one.
Yeah, what was that before?
Hmm.
I don't know. You want me to ask Larry about it?
Sure, I should sign it, or I'm all good with it. Just thought you-
Yeah, I
Point that
can
out to
follow
you.
up on that.
Thank you.
I'm glad you saw that, because I think I know what that might be, but let me
Okay.
confirm it before I say. Sandy, when you get a chance,
Yes.
can you find the receipts for these two purchases? And just leave a copy for Larry,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I'll call him, I want to talk to him about
Okay.
it. When you get a chance, doesn't have to be first
Will
thing.
do.
Okay. It's,
Okay.
Hmm?
Oh,
one sec.
if you're set with that, road commissioner's report, please.
Okay. We've been out sanding, plowing when we had to. We'll talk about guardrails later, further on the agenda. I will say, did you know Larry got hurt?
I
Broke
heard
a
that.
rib.
He broke a rib, okay.
He slipped coming off of a truck, landed into a plow, broke a rib, took a couple days off last week. Wasn't sure if he'd be back this week or not. So otherwise, the other two are keeping up, it seems.
Okay. Are anywhere in how he's feeling at all? Have you been in touch?
I talked to him Friday. I didn't, and I believe that happened Tuesday,
Okay,
Tuesday. And he's still pretty sore on Friday.
okay.
Ribs, I've broken ribs. They can hurt.
Yeah.
They can hurt. So he's started off taking personal sick time, but if it's going to be extended, it may get into some workman's comp time, but we'll see.
Okay.
He'd rather not if he didn't have to.
All right.
That's all I have for that.
All right. Under new business, we have a request from Andy Crossman for $25,000 for the cemetery fund.
No, that was the money
Oh.
that he says we've been putting into the town's regular, not the cemetery.
Oh,
I think we were gonna look into that, but I don't think we had it, so we can table it if you want to.
yeah, we need, I think, some more specifics for that, but that's a good thing we can pick up afterward because we're going to discuss fund balances in the special meeting.
Okay.
I see Thanksgiving holiday.
We have it as Friday being a day off, but we don't work anyway Friday. So I think Elaine just wanted to clarify that, but of course, the highway crew does work Fridays usually.
After Thanksgiving.
So maybe they get that day off? Is that okay?
What's been done in the past with that?
I don't know what the highway crew does. I would need to check with Elaine, but I can check. They probably get that day off plus Turkey Day.
So we have to check and see if it's a town holiday the day after. And if not, we might think about, in our policy manual, if they can use, maybe think about whether sick time is combined time off, something like that, how we want to let them use time.
Okay.
I'll find out.
Okay. So that policy has not been approved yet for combined time off. We need to revisit that, but that would be something for us to think about. That brings us to guardrails on Dublin Road,
That was that letter,
Round Top.
Mr. Mason?
It's
Round Top.
Round Top Road,
Got it. Yeah.
not
Oh,
Dublin.
I'm sorry. I thought he had said Dublin.
So we have a gentleman that went off the road and he requested we consider putting guardrails on Round Top. We're kind of sitting on the fence, I think, on whether that's an appropriate use of town funds or not right now. He has stated that he's lived up there 19 years, and I don't know what happened that one day that he went off. It obviously was a lot of icy conditions before we got to sanding. I did get some rough budget prices on guardrails. We can get used rails installed for $25 a foot or new rails for $35 a foot. Question is, how many feet do we really need to make that road safe? Is it 500 or a couple of thousand feet? Larry, the town road foreman, is not in favor of it because of the steepness of the banks. He thinks they won't hold up good when you start pushing snow up against them, because we have some guardrails farther up the hill that have failed because of that reason. So we're still trying to figure out if that's the best approach or not, or if it's something we need to pursue and budget some money for. But we'll continue talking about that, more so with Larry when he gets back online, and figure out how many feet we really need, and decide whether we want to budget money for it in next year's budget exercise. Because it could be quite a lot of money. So I guess we're going to table it for now?
Yep, until we get an estimate and Larry's opinion, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So let's figure out a quantity and an estimate, and we'll get Larry
Okay.
to buy into it if that's what we want to do.
So I have on the list masks in town offices. Would we like to wait for Keith for that discussion? Okay, I think
Sure.
that one's, it might be important to him.
Yep.
Welcome sheet to residents.
I think Elaine's working on something that she'd like to pass out to residents. We could run it by you and let you, see what's it. Just one little sheet that gives them some information about what's going on, who to call.
Okay, it's to cover zoning,
Pardon me?
cover things like zoning.
Yes.
Okay, our energy code, the state's energy code,
I'll see what she
dog
does.
licenses. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We have for discussion, the hole over on by Margot Marone's house.
So how big is this? How diameter?
I think we should do a site visit.
Okay.
Maybe. But I've heard it's a big hole, it's deep. I've been told that there's water in it, and that if you happen to fall in that by accident, you probably would not get out.
Wonder how it came to be.
I heard it's a part of a mine.
Okay.
So a few people on that road have expressed, even though it's on private property, a little bit concerned, their dog or a child, goes in. Especially this time of year, even if the water is not frozen, they would get hypothermic and probably not get rescued in a timely.
Okay.
I did speak with Margot about it. She said, yeah, I haven't been over there in a long time. Sean Bemis and Steve Hallner did some work because they were concerned about it and put some stuff in it, but it sounds like that started to deteriorate. And Steve mentioned his ongoing concern about it. So maybe we take a look and see if it's appropriate to add some more permanent type of material.
Okay.
Just let me know when a good time to go have
Okay.
a look at it is with you, and maybe Larry.
All righty.
Under old business, we have cash receipts training with NEMRIC.
Cynthia will be here, I think it's next Wednesday, to assist me on that new module.
Excellent. Heat tape on the roof?
I talked to Larry about that, and guess what we decided was to hold off on that. We wanted to see where this renovation project's gonna go
Okay.
before we spent the money on heat tape. And if our proposed weatherization project does not pass a vote tomorrow, then we'll probably reconsider heat tape.
While we're with that, is there anything else with building maintenance?
No. Back up.
Yeah.
I thought of one other item on the road commissioner's report. The Stickney Bridge lights. We have been trying to get those to work and having difficulty. Apparently, ice is getting in some of the conduits and raising havoc with some of the wiring, and it needs to be rewired is what we've determined. We had an electrician look at it. We've looked at it a couple of times this past summer. But the problem is we need to run some new conduit. But before we do that, we should really look at that bridge because it is in need of some repair on the concrete portions of the bridge. And we should do that first before we start running new conduit on the outside or under it, because it's going to be in the way of that concrete repair if we run the conduits first. So our plan is to look at the concrete repair, try and get that done in the spring, and follow it up with new wiring for the lights, get everything back in shape. Hi, Keith. So I'm done with that.
Okay.
These are signatures. That's Sandy's pile.
We're just taking care of normal,
Huh?
running the mill crap right now, anyway.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'll wear a mask, obviously.
It will, a good time. We had on a new business, we delayed the discussion around masks in town offices till you got here. We thought you'd probably want to be a part of it or not, as the case may be, but, so I guess we could move to that.
Sure.
And so the discussion is, the governor's authorized us to, as a select board, pass townwide mask mandates. I'm not sure that's necessary on the size of the town of Plymouth and the gathering areas available, but I do think that in the town office building, you want me to shut that door?
So Sandy, I see there's a sign on the front door that says mask required if you're not vaccinated.
I made new ones.
In
I
case.
made a new one in case you vote to
Okay.
require masks of everyone.
Okay, well, for tonight, you mean?
Yes, I could put it tonight.
Right. No, my question was gonna be,
I'm sorry.
are you comfortable with that policy that's on the door now? You and Elaine and whoever's working in the office?
I'd rather have everybody wear masks. Since COVID seems to be a little bit more prevalent right now, even in Plymouth. So I think I'd err on the side of caution.
That's a different animal than what the legislature has tasked us with. I mean, we can continue to do our own thing here in town hall for you, but you know where I stand on townwide mask mandate. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard anybody in favor of townwide.
I think we're concerned about the employee safety here at the town building.
Yeah, that's all.
And so if I was going to make a motion, I would say we have a mask mandate in the town offices, but I still think we need to approve that on a monthly basis for the governor's order.
I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road. I mean, I wouldn't do it in the context of whatever, within the official legislative mandate. I would do it as a town directive. We hereby the town of Plymouth mandated a mask. We have a mask mandate within the confines of our public building, but we're not, we're not signing on to the legislative mandate of the
Yeah, I
town.
know businesses can do that. I'm not sure. I didn't know. I had studied the statute closely enough to
It gives the town 45 days to either or implement a, town-wide mask mandate, meaning every public venue within the town would require a mask. And that's how the legislation reads. It gives us the right, but not the obligation. So we're not obligated to do it. We have the quote-unquote right to do it if we see fit. And it has to be reconfigured every month until April 30th. So every month it would have to be revoted on amongst us. There's no public input either. It's just a select board level decision. So, and there's also enforcement measures that they bake into it, which I find ridiculous.
Well, we don't have the public spaces in Plymouth.
Well, we're in the only one.
Yeah, right.
So.
You do, actually.
So you okay with that, Sandy?
Yes, so can I post a sign that we require masks right now, whether you're vaccinated or not?
Yep.
Excellent.
So you made a motion, I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye. You got it.
Charlie's on the phone. Is there anything, Charlie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can't quite hear you.
Okay.
It's on our end.
Oh. There you go.
Uh-huh.
All right, can you hear me now?
I like the
Nice TV.
That's pretty cool.
That is, that's great.
All right, so Keith is right. I mean, you don't have to do anything, and you do as the legal owner of the building, you can implement a rule as to what you require without trying to enact anything that goes across the rest of the town. You do have other commercial buildings in the town in terms of a bed and breakfast or an inn, something that is open to the public. It's up to you to decide what that means for open to the public. So that's another kind of variation on that. It was really a strange thing. Before the executive orders, the town already had the ability to try to put into place health measures to mitigate any kind of sickness. But in the ensuing executive orders between March of 2020 and July of 2021, the governor said, yes, that still exists except for COVID mitigation, and then it was subject to the approval of the governor. And that's when Brattleboro passed something and the governor said, no, I'm not going to allow that to happen. So it was kind of a political football, went back and forth between the governor and the legislature. And he said, I'll allow towns to do it on a case-by-case basis as long as it fits this prescription. And then the town could vote on it, but then renew it every 30 days. So that is in fact the case, and that still goes on. So yeah, you can do anything you want in terms of deciding whether how you want to define public space, if you wanted to do that, and pass that ordinance as a select board and then renew it every 30 days. But I think you got it. You already got it hit the nail on the head with what it is. Yeah, enforcement is most of the towns that I know do not want to try to enforce any kind of ordinance like this. It just creates confrontations between visitors and owners that nobody wants to have. So it was passed with the idea that this is encouraged, but you can understand the limitations of it.
All right.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you. Sorry I'm not there in person.
Well, we get to see your face this way. I'll get some masks for the special town meeting from the fire department, and Sandy can put a notice on the door.
Yes.
Awesome.
Talking about for tonight?
Yeah.
I was doing 25 miles an hour the whole way here.
Probably gonna be
thicker than pea soup.
Probably be quiet.
I don't think we'll see.
Okay. Special meeting regarding ARPA funds. That's something we want to have later in the month. I mean, it could be at a select board meeting, really not a special meeting. Just want to get that, if we have it, like to get the word out just so people know we're talking about it. some night to maybe get some participation.
Talking about for input.
Yeah.
I will say, Keith, I've been talking to the league, and I got a copy of a list of approved uses here. And this item 1.7 seems to indicate that we can use these funds for a weatherization project if we choose to. And that's what the league told me also. So Keith, Jay and I talking about if we were gonna post this publicly for input, we can post this on the website and people can look at it. If they want, then we can, if we choose, have a public meeting and let the voters decide.
There's a whole lot.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot. So do we know when our second round's coming?
I don't know. I thought it was later this
I
year.
don't know yet.
Is there any,
You could ask.
I'm just thinking of special meeting and everything it takes to put together a special meeting. Is there any reason we should not or could not wait till town meeting?
No. Unless we wanted ideas first, but
Yeah.
it's up to you.
Oh, well, wait a minute, we talked about having to set a regular selectmen's meeting, right?
Yeah, right, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
So not really a special
Yeah,
meeting?
yeah.
Oh, so, okay, then that's fine.
Just thought maybe we get the word out in December, January, that, hey, we're thinking about how to use this money.
Let's get it on agenda. That'd be great. Anybody has any ideas, they can go to the website and let us know what they think.
It seems like January at this point, yeah?
Yeah, probably.
That's pretty broad. I mean, there's a lot I think I fall into that.
Yeah.
How many different categories there?
Yeah,
Looks like about 50.
yeah. Yeah. All right.
Or if you want to skin the cat.
Looks like it'll be easier to spend.
Yeah, looking at that, yeah, I mean, it's not, won't be like, probably have too many ideas.
Well, we got a seat for you right over here. This is Bill McClay.
Beautiful night out there.
Very scenic tonight.
There's actually a power line down, I don't know if you knew.
Yeah, we might be on generator, I think, or powered.
Is it in outside?
It's like a mile down, or actually like a couple hundred yards down
Okay.
on the highway.
That's where I saw the spark.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to drive under the lower power
Hi,
line.
could you just tell me how much your ARPA funds, what you're expecting?
I believe it's 131,000.
Thank you.
Bill, did you bring that slide, show?
Yeah,
Every time, we got plenty of
is
time.
it, I've got a thumb drive.
Yeah. Actually, this one I'm gonna need to watch, but you can probably do it on, oh yeah, so this, yeah, I can do this. I'm supposed to watch this for Tom while he's moderating.
So I've got a thumb drive, I've got a computer.
Probably a computer, we can let you share on
Okay.
Zoom. Yeah, does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead and get it.
Well, he'll be here at 7
Come
o'clock.
here, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got a half hour. Special meeting.
That's right, it's 7.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he'll be here. Bill's just early, that's all.
Ludlow ambulance coverage.
Yeah.
I gave them a call just to find out, what they were thinking. At first, the proposal said they would be saving us money, which is probably true. But we hadn't heard, and that was the sort of assumption that would cover the entire town, but there's a few places that it doesn't cover over on the east side. So I did ask Stephanie what Misha from Woodstock Ambulance thought about that, and there may be a fee involved. And I think they've been talking, but I thought it'd be better if we heard from them ourselves, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. So I invited them to a select board meeting, and they would coordinate and get in touch with us when they could both make it, either in person or by Zoom, to discuss this.
Okay, that would be both of them?
Yes,
Oh,
just so
great.
we're sure that the communication is clear and that we understand what we're getting. While I was on the phone, Stephanie actually offered to supply an annual report for the town of what the ambulance service has provided in terms of services, like number of calls, things like that. So at least people understand what it is that we're paying for in terms of services.
Jay, have we talked to Al or Sue?
They were also on the email chain being invited to join that discussion.
Do you know their take on it? Are they for it or against it?
I think they're pretty objective, and I think there might be a little bit more information that we need for them to be certain about a decision. And
Okay,
it's probably the same question that we have.
Wasn't it based on, came down to whether or not Woodstock would only partially cover those couple of areas?
Yeah, because it's kind of split now, and then there's this, like, a couple sections of road down there that,
Ludlow was willing to take it all over except for those two places at Woodstock.
yeah, and they might, but I think they recognize that their response time would just be starting to get longer where Woodstock, and this is where I'd like to hear them both speak together to make sure that response time, because that's like the important part of the
a
coverage,
good
right?
idea.
Is who can get
get them
there.
both here.
Yeah, which
I
is
like
probably
that.
more important than the actual dollar amount to us, to some degree, to make sure that we have
Sure.
a decent response time. And I think that's where Al and Sue would be thinking, just knowing.
Okay. Great. So they're going to get back to us with a
Day and time.
date. Okay.
Yep. Delinquent tax report?
Margot's been working on that, and we're working with Stephen Ancuda. Probably we'll be hiring him to do the tax sale, but we don't have any definitive dates as yet.
Okay. Sounds good.
I had talked to Bill Mew and to Steve Akuda, and I was telling Jay earlier, I would recommend Steve Akuda to be the tax attorney for a variety of reasons. And I did talk to him about his fees, and all of his fees, he told me, were collectible as a cost in a tax sale for reimbursement, except for sales that there are no buyers for, and the town ends up taking over a property. But in that case, when the town does finally go to sell that property, they should be able to recoup those costs. So basically, it's not costing the town anything, according to him. And he did say that, I asked him if he needed a contract or something signed from us, and he said if you just make a motion in your meeting tonight that we're prepared to hire him for tax sales, that would suffice. And he gave me the language for the motion, and I'm going to read it right now, and we're going to make that motion. So I will make a motion that we engage the attorneys Parker and Duca to be compensated for preparing tax sales at the rate of 15% of the uncollected taxes, water and sewer. I further move that the select board chairman is authorized in his discretion to bid on behalf of the town at upcoming tax sales on all properties for which there is not a sufficient bid to reimburse the town for all uncollected taxes, water, sewer, interest, penalties, fees, costs, and at the selectman's discretion. Simple as that.
Meaning we can bid on it.
Huh?
We can bid on the property.
Yeah, sure you can. So we need a second if we're going to hire him for this motion?
15%, that's what he's sticking at?
Yeah.
15% of the gross collected.
Yes. Yes. Of the uncollected taxes and fees.
I second it.
Okay. You got a second?
Aye.
Aye.
In favor.
So it's official, Sandy.
Okay, thank you, I'll
No.
take care of it.
Hire him and contact him and communicate with him, and he knows you'll be calling.
That brings us to the website. Has anybody here seen the website, the new website? What did you think?
It's great, so much better.
Thank you.
Easier to get around.
Great. Good job.
Very nice.
Thank you, Keith. It's all Keith. He did it.
I had a lot of help. Jag designed the overall, the template, whatnot. I did finagling, behind the scenes, copy editing, stuff like that. Sandy, I had spoken to John today regarding, the issues that you're having.
Right.
And I don't know if he's reached out to you, but
Not yet.
he's designed a video tutorial that he's going to send you a link to. I'm going to look at it too to see how,
Okay,
I will come in a day, and once I see this tutorial, it amounts to cutting and pasting code to to put a new button up. I get that. So it could be tricky. There's another way we can approach it, which would be to do it's a redesign the back door of the site where it'd be a PDF uploader. So it would be a lot easier. It would just entail, we'd kind of have to it would entail a little bit of money paying him an hourly rate to reconfigure some of that, but it would be an easier
Yeah.
way forward. So you'd have to decide, once you see this tutorial and we sit and go through it together, if it seems easier, we can roll with that for a while. If it doesn't, then we can, maybe regroup and
Okay,
try and, get a budget, see what he wants to, he said it wouldn't be that expensive, but if you wanted to go that route.
might be.
So it's going to be up to you, I think.
Thank you all. Fluffy right about it. Thanks.
Cool. If that's it for the website, then brings us to audit,
You have it.
which is complete. We're just chasing down a few little things. I think there's some information from Midge about cemetery funds that we're just trying to figure out for the auditors. Other than that, we're set, and I think we'll be on to budgeting for the upcoming year pretty soon, starting that process. And that's all I have until the special town meeting.
I don't have anything else.
Seven.
Anything else? I guess I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second.
Should have wrote it down.
We're gonna adjourn? We're adjourned.
I'll remember.
Hey, can I be heard in there? Hello? Anybody hear me? Check, check, 1, 2, hello?
We can hear you.
Can you hear us
guys-
now?
You guys know there's a wire right down the street and they're probably gonna have to cut the power when, they get here?
Yeah, we know that. Yep.
Just checking.
Thank you. We're on generator power right now, I believe.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
They were talking about this windstorm all day, but it hasn't really materialized.
Yeah, they have, but maybe it's coming.
It's late.
It took down the power line. It wasn't that windy. We was driving down, you're right, it wasn't wind.
There hasn't been, it hasn't been much all day. Maybe it's late, it's delayed front, that would be great, Always worse when it comes through at night.
Well, at least it wasn't snowing all the way down.
That's what this should be.
What's up? You broke up with her? Oh, okay, well, fine. That's, is what it is. That's what happens when you're 18, I guess. Yeah, well, I didn't know. How would I know unless you told me? Yeah, so I gave Juan a piano lesson on Zoom tonight, or this afternoon. He's doing really well. He was playing this
multiple participants.
Okay, so Bill, we'll try to make you,
Actually, Bill should be able to share, I
I
think.
just try right now?
So do I push share screen or?
Yep.
Okay.
Here you go. Share now.
So I just leave it there?
That's it.
It's not up.
Oh, there we go.
There it is.
We'll just, I'll leave.
Great.
You want during your presentation, I guess.
it?
Yeah.
It is
That'd be fine.
6:58.
That'd be great.
Yeah, because to go back.
6:59.
Whenever I can mess it up.
So I'll open the,
Okay,
Is there anything
Why-
else that
so-
you can ask us when I speak or?
I think so. Yeah, because
Then I can do it otherwise.
I don't see it as a problem.
you want me to
No.
phase this in?
Sure.
Basically, I'm gonna tell everybody all motions are remarks. Be addressed to the moderator. Please stand to be recognized. State your name clearly. State your name clearly. That's what they want to know. And that's goes for people at home.
Okay.
And you saying they are on mute or keep it on?
So we want them muted unless they're going to speak.
Okay,
And we would like them to have their name here. And if they need explanations, there's also I can help them with that, but there's a raise hand function as well in the react. So if they want to speak, you want them to raise their hand in the using reactions button.
Am I okay here?
You're perfect.
Okay.
there it is.
I know.
Can't change things up now.
No.
The meeting will come to order. This is a special meeting convened by the Plymouth Town Select Board to discuss articles duly warned to be voted on by Australian Ballot tomorrow. They have invited me to chair the meeting. If no one objects, I will use Robert rules to run the meeting. It's a very orderly way to do it. The one difference between this and town meeting is non-residents can feel free to participate in this meeting. Can everyone hear me? All motions and remarks should be addressed this way to the moderator and the select board, not talking amongst yourselves. Please stand to be recognized. If you can't stand easily, we understand. State your name clearly, please. We ask that those at home on Zoom mute unless you are speaking and have your name visible so that we can see who's talking. And there is a raised hand function which Jay will monitor if it's your turn to speak. Each person will get one chance to speak during any debate before anyone can speak a second time on an issue. No one may speak more than twice in debate on any question. Well, we'll relax that one. There's no microphone, so we don't have to worry about that. I'm going to read the warning, and then I will bring up the articles one by one, at which point the select board will either give a presentation or open the discussion, and then we will freely debate it till you're exhausted. Okay. Warning, the legal voters of the town of Plymouth are hereby warned to meet at the Plymouth Municipal Building at 7 p.m. on Monday, December 6, 2021, to transact at that time business not involving voting by Australian ballot or voting required by law by ballot. The polls will be open Tuesday, December 7, 2021, at the Plymouth Municipal Building from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. for the purpose of voting by Australian ballot. The business to be transacted will include Article 1, to see if the voters will authorize the Select Board to assign fund balances in accordance with 24 VSA 2804. Article 2, to see if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of $950,000 for repair of the town hall roof, completing deferred maintenance, performing energy/weatherization upgrades, and the addition of solar as outlined in option D as prepared by William Maclay Architects, And Article 3, to see if the town will approve a short-term rental ordinance. Article 1, to see if the voters will authorize the select board to assign fund balances in according with 24 VSA 2804. I will turn to the selectmen to tell us what that's all about.
So this is partially for legal compliance, and it's also for long-term planning of town finances, particularly as it comes to capital improvements. The auditors have wanted to see this, and we would like the authority to assign fund balances for things like highway expenditures, the building fund, reserve fund, and office equipment. Those funds currently have money in them, but there is no assigned balance to them. So the select board is asking for your permission to assign balances. The second, and this is where we will plan for expenditures. This is not giving the select board to just go ahead and authorize to make a bunch of purchases. It's just for us to set those fund balances. You will have an opportunity in the spring when we present the budget to have a voice on how we're going to get funds into those funds. I know that sounds redundant. Money into those funds. Currently, the allocation every year. We do not have a record of how the select board is authorized to do that. Just as an example, the office equipment reserve fund has $66,000. My guess is after some discussion, we would probably lower that to a something more like $25,000 or $30,000 as an example. And we would either transfer that money to another fund or put it back in the general fund. Part 2 of this, which we'll ask you in the spring, is to allow us to use an unassigned fund balance policy, which is basically a reserve for the town. Right now, the town has over $1 million in the general fund, and legally, that's probably a little bit too much money. We are grateful in this moment to have that balance based on what we are going to ask in another article. But looking forward, we are planning on approximately 15 to 20% of the town's annual budget to make sure that we do not ever have to borrow money to do what we need to do to run town operations. And we also want to make sure that we are not holding too much of the taxpayers' money. That is part 2. That is not what we're going to vote on tonight, but I wanted to give you all that context. So for this evening, we are asking again for your authorization to assign fund balances. And that generally relates to the office equipment, the building reserve fund, and the office equipment fund. And there are some others, record restoration, the reappraisal reserve, and ARPA, which will be temporary. So I don't think we'll have control over that. But that's what we are asking you to do. And open that up to questions.
Who's first? In the back, please stand and state your name clearly and loudly.
Mark Fletcher. I just want some clarification. So is this just about apportioning funds into these various accounts for the purpose of being able to say specifically this money is targeted here, this is targeted here? Is this about establishing minimum balances that you want to try to keep? Is this about, like going forward, what you hope to maintain in this account? Or
Yeah, Mark, that is correct. And these balances, we could request for changes at really any year. We would like to go, moving forward, have the town vote on these either dollar amounts or percentages. We'll lay that out with the budget at the upcoming town meeting. But yes, we want to make sure that we're planning properly, that we're putting enough money aside every year to replace trucks in the highway department or a loader, and that we are not asking for too much money at any one time from the town folks. So it's actually planning, budgeting, and saving accordingly is really what we're trying to do. And if we have too much money, we find too much money for some reason, we stop adding to that account or return some to the taxpayers or to a different account.
can I follow up? Or
Yes.
So again, are we saying that this is just kind of temporary until sometime in spring when we lay down like hard numbers of what's going to be used where? Or this is like the first pass at this process from now?
This is the first of two parts in a legal process. So the select board says, would like just the authorization to assign these balances, like highway equipment reserve, we might like to say that we would like to propose that we could have probably consolidated this and done it in the spring under one meeting, but I think we wanted to get the conversation started, so it made sense for us to do it too. But sort of establish these balances, think about what we're going to be spending money on over the long term. And yes, then in the spring, we're going to be thinking, okay, what is the shortfall or surplus in this account, and how will we raise that money? And that will be reflected in the budget when the town is asked to vote and approve it.
Can I ask one more question? And so if come the spring, it's thought that maybe one balance was not, assigned to be big enough or too big, is there another chance then for the town to come together and authorize moving this money around or changing these balances, or how often is that going to happen?
Assuming that we'll be able to meet in person, I believe we could make amendment to the budget at town meeting if we're able to meet in person like this, or we could have another special town meeting. But I think the preference would be to do it right at the annual town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and then we'll also be able to take questions, comments from folks as we lay out the budget. A second component, right now, as I mentioned, we find ourselves with over $1 million in the general fund. In that article, if approved, we would use general fund money in conjunction with the building reserve to fund the project. Last year, the town's general fund has been building over time. Part of that was due to revenue outpacing expenditures, and some of that was due to Hurricane Irene, is my understanding. That's where a lot of that money had come from. And the taxpayers covered a lot of the money associated with Irene, and then the funds started rolling in, and that helped build that balance up. And we discovered, last year that the general fund balance is really high. It actually was over a year's worth of operating expenses. So we took a couple $100,000 of that reserve and gave it back to the taxpayers. And that's what we're thinking about going forward. We would be watching the balance in the general fund to make sure it doesn't get too high, and we would set a percentage or a dollar amount in the spring budget vote. Yeah.
So the actual vote, if that would kick off the renovations, would be in town meeting in March?
The renovations you'd be voting on tomorrow, and if you read the sort of addendum that we put on the town website, it sort of explains how we would pay for it. But that would reduce the general fund balance. And it would reduce it to a balance that we would feel comfortable with as a reserve, but we have not assigned a balance to that. I think when we find out how people vote tonight, if it's approved, we'll make adjustments and think about how to address either a shortfall or a surplus.
Is there any further discussion of Article 1? Well, if there's no further discussion of Article 1, we're making great progress. Let's move on to Article 2. To see if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of $950,000 for repair of the town hall roof, completing deferred maintenance, performing energy/weatherization upgrades, and the addition of solar as outlined in option D, prepared by William Mackley Architects. Anyone on the select board want to?
Yep, that one's mine, Tom.
Okay.
So let me start off by going over a little history and trying to explain how we got to this proposed project and what we need to do to move forward. So two things happened that really spurred us into action. And the first item was 3 years ago when I first became a selectman. I was in the selectman's office going through some files, and I came across an energy audit report that was done by Two Rivers out of Queechee, and it was dated 11 years ago. And as I went through this report, it was pretty detailed, and it talked about leaky air in the building, coming in through windows, doors, through wall panels. Building doesn't meet any type of energy codes of today's standards. The boiler's pushing 40 years old and it's run its useful life out. There's no ventilation in this building that's required in commercial buildings. So it went on and on about all the deficiencies. But what really caught my attention was, as I read the conclusion of the report summary, it said that this building is using 50% more energy to heat than a comparable building of this size in this environment. Now, depending on the cost of fuel and where we buy it and other circumstances, we could spend anywhere from $25,000 to $30,000 a year in propane just to heat this building, and half of that money is going right through the roof. It's being wasted, and it has been wasted for the last 11 years. Now, you can do the math, but we're talking about a lot of money. Now, the previous board of 10, 12 years ago, who commissioned this report, recognized that this was going to be a big project, and they didn't want to go to the voters with a bond vote, which would increase taxes. And I talked to two of the selectmen from that era, Larry Lyons and Andy Crosman, and they told me they recognized that was a big project, and they just started a reserve fund, and they started putting away a fair amount of money every year in the budget. And they couldn't remember the exact amount, but it was somewhere between $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year. Now, over the years, somehow things change. Town clerks change, treasurers change, boards change, and I think that money stayed in the budget every year, and I think that explains where some of this $1 million also came from. But back then, it was allocated for building renovation. Now, that heat loss and loss of money really got me thinking that we need to do a project here, because this is just a waste of money and it's just going to continue to get worse. The second item that really triggered me into action was roof leaks on this building. So it really came to a head when last winter I would get calls, at least one or two, where water's pouring in the building, in the front offices, puddles on the floor, water on the desk, water on computers. And the problem was ice dams on the edge of the roof, stopping the water from running off and backing up and hitting seams. We hired a contractor to come in and see what he can do about stopping the leaks. And he worked on this on and off all summer, and we got all of the roof leaks stopped 3 seasons of the year, except for winter. And we're going to have a continuous problem. What happens is when you have a foot of snow on the roof, 8 inches of snow on the roof, and this roof deck is warm because of the heat loss. It melts the bottom layer of snow, water runs down the roof because the deck is warm. It hits the edge of the roof where it's ice cold, and it starts building an ice dam. And it builds up to 8, 10 inches deep, backs water up the roof, and the water finds a seam. Now, keep in mind, on the standing seam roof, there is a seam in this roof every 2 feet going up that roof from the eave all the way up to the ridge. And when these roof panels are installed, when the building is built, it has a sealant in that seam that comes from the factory, and the panels kind of crimp together and they seam and they hold up well. But after 40 years, that metal expands and contracts dramatically in different temperature conditions. You could have 10 degrees at night where everything's contracted, sun comes out and hits it, heats up those panels, they expand. So there's a lot of movement in those panels going back and forth. That wears and tears on that sealant. And the other thing that happens is that sealant's 40 years old. What happens when you put a bead of caulk out in the weather for 40 years? It's going to dry out, it's going to crack. So any of that water that backs up from that ice dam is going to find those leaks and come into our building. That's what's happening. So let's talk about, let me go through my notes here.
Oh, could I just add to that, Rick?
Yeah, please.
You know, one thing we found interesting when we started researching this is this building was designed to actually leak heat to keep the roof clear, because they really weren't designed strong enough for the snow loads in the Northeast.
That's actually that era. Structurally, they wanted to save money.
Yeah.
This was an inexpensive metal building, and they did design it so that it would melt the snow, so they didn't have to have as big a structure. Well, that's what's left your town with a real problem. Because if you want to start to insulate and not have leaking in it, you then got to beef up the structure of the building. So that's one of the core reasons that there really needs to be an upgrade.
Okay, the general consensus of the board was if we're going to do a project, we're going to do it right. We want to do something that's going to last another 30 or 40 years and not keep putting Band-Aids on the problems. So 2 years ago, before Keith was on the board, I think Jay might have been there, we each of the board members brought in different contractors to look at the problems and look at suggestions or options on how to correct the deficiencies. We got 3 different opinions, okay? One would say we need to do spray foam, another would give you a different opinion. We couldn't come to a consensus on what needed to be done, so the board decided that we needed some outside expertise. We did some research on design firms. We ended up hiring Bill McClay, architects, and Bill assembled a team of architects, structural engineers, mechanical engineers, and professional construction estimators. They developed their own energy audit, and they came up with 4 options for us to consider. Each option included cost and payback durations, and the board decided that option D would address the needs, and we have the cash on hand to complete option D if the voters approve it. This report that they developed was put on the website about 3 months ago. It's all out there for everybody to see. We tried to be as transparent as we could with it. And I've asked Bill to come to our meeting tonight, and he's going to talk about the details of the construction that we're proposing with this project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bill. And then we'll do some questions and answers. Yeah, we need to.
My mask off, I do have
Sure, Bill.
vaccine shots, so
All righty.
hopefully I'll be a little more understandable. So we were asked to look at this building. I think in particular, we were selected because one of the things our firm does is looks at financial analysis of what level of insulation and what level of solar actually financially makes sense. Because ultimately it's about the bottom line for the taxpayers in the town and having a prudent investment. And so I guess I actually should go to the presentations.
You might have to share that screen again. It looks like it's
There it is. So we were asked to, look at the energy of the building, but very clearly it required looking at the structure, mechanical systems, electrical systems. There had been an excellent report, as was mentioned. So we looked at net zero, we looked at high performing, we looked at code compliant and said, what's the best? And, originally there was interest in it being net zero, but we discovered that the cost to do that, meaning net zero means basically you're producing more energy than you consume on an annual basis, and all of that energy is renewable. And going to that level did not make financial sense. So we came up with an intermediate level that does seem to make financial sense. And, how do I advance this? I would have done this. No, we definitely go right ahead.
there. It is.
They're trying to advance it, it doesn't.
Well, it needs to go. Is that?
It should be able
It's
to
a
go
Adobe.
here.
Yeah.
Is it PowerPoint? This actually, I guess, isn't a PowerPoint.
Yeah. You can scroll, but it's a PDF.
Actually, no, I've got
What is it?
He's from the big stuff.
Screen. It has everything covered. Just everything. Sorry about this.
I think it's an Adobe PDF.
Yeah, this, no,
That's working. Oh.
So one of the things that we found was the building is, close to 50 years old. And it really has reached gone beyond its lifetime. And so that really looks at deferred maintenance. And to be current, even with code these days, you need a stronger structure to hold up more snow. And then you can stop the leaks and you can put more insulation on the roof, which then helps to keep the building warm. If you look now in the garage spaces, you'll see places where the vinyl faced insulation's fallen down over the years. It's definitely not airtight. Up over this ceiling here, there's places where you can see that the fiberglass insulation is being disturbed and it's just hot air going to the outdoors. You can, I think, vaguely see up in the picture on the upper left that there's no roof overhang, as was pointed out. So the water comes off of the roof and it goes right down to the town clerk's office. And if you look on the outside, the brick has mold on it. And, so some of that moisture is getting into the wall and the wall assembly, and that's why having an adequate ventilation system, which there isn't, is important. So things like that become deferred maintenance. You really need to have adequate insulation. The lighting is old fluorescent lighting. There's much more efficient LED lighting these days. The garage doors are beyond their useful life. The boiler, as was mentioned. So there's just all of the fundamentals of the building are beyond their useful life. At one point, what somebody did ask, well, what about if we just built a whole new building? And I think, Rick, you were the one who was saying a town nearby was in the process of doing that for $2 million. So,
Yeah.
Building new isn't perfect either in terms of the expense. So the first thing we looked at was a very high-performing energy envelope. So basically, it's putting on new metal insulated panels, which will also be done in a way that it air seals the walls so the air doesn't just go floating through the walls. The windows will be new triple glazed windows. What we call an air control layer will be put on, which basically really stops air movement through the building. There will be foundation insulation around this end of the building, not in terms of the garages, because this is occupied and on greater help. The brick will be moved in insulated panels. A new membrane roof with, it says R6 insulation, it's R60 insulation would go up on the roof. So this is, and then new solar panels can go on this roof, and you could in the future even put more on to supply more of the town. It's a pretty big roof. So it's a pretty huge upgrade. The inside here will get air source heat pumps so that there will be fresh air, and it's electric, high efficiency electric. That's actually in the next. So in terms of mechanical systems, this new lighting, there will be 3-phase power that's brought into the building. There will be air source heat pumps in this office space, so there will be cooling in the summertime. My understanding from the town clerk's office is that there's, heaters on in the summertime and heaters on in the wintertime. It will be improving those things. The propane units we looked at, the ideal scenario would have been what's called an air to water source heat pump, which and a radiant slab in the garage bays. That we did look at, but it was unfortunately expensive, very expensive at this time. And later on, that is something that could be done if the town so decides. So this was sort of the financial analysis that we did. Rick was sort of saying we used to call it D, but now we're just calling it B. So at the bottom, you see the A1 is if you took the existing building and you took the cost for 30 years, the capital and operating costs, of that, $1.3 million would be in operating costs, mostly energy costs. And then we included the deferred maintenance, which should ultimately be done at $400,000, and then looked at the potential for solar. If we went to what we're calling the hybrid office, the air source heat pump office, and the garage with propane, you can reduce those numbers significantly. And the best scenario is if you added solar. Solar actually is very
To the Okemo Valley staff, everybody else, I've lost the transmission.
I think there's a power issue in the area.
I think they got them
Okay,
fixed,
so
that's the
yeah.
problem.
Power supply's fried, so I'm on battery.
Can we bring the presentation back up?
I'm giving it my best. I'm going to screen share now and.
Yeah, just cut the power off.
You go, Bill.
There you go, you're back.
Okay.
This is Chase down at Rick's Road.
Shall I speak again? So I guess I'll start with this slide again.
I hear audio.
So we looked at three options, which I briefly described before, but I'll re-describe just in case there was something missed. But so we looked at three options: the existing building and what the capital and operating costs were cumulatively for 30 years, which is on the left and is called A1. We looked at an intermediate solution, which had a air to water source heat pump we looked at a hybrid office air source heat pump and a garage propane. And then we looked at that same one with adding solar. And that will save the town over $400,000 over 30 years. No, this isn't advancing. There it is. So over 30 years, that cumulative savings is $400,000.
30 years of solar panels?
What?
30 years on the solar panels?
No. Oh, you mean in terms of in there? Yeah.
Tom Durling, by the way.
That is for the whole package. Solar panels are warranted for about 25 years. They lose about 0.5% a year. So in 30 years, they'll still be producing power. It does go down slightly. At least that's my understanding.
Okay.
Cumulative energy costs and everything, that number.
Right.
Are there any
By making
questions?
these investments
Heating,
over that 30
fuel,
years.
everything combined, lighting, heating, fuel, whatever the solar panels put out.
And this is just to show you that when you put new panels on the building, you're going to have choices as to what it looks like, which I think could be better than what you have now. This also, at the end, you see the roof overhang at the right-hand side of the building, which would be a new roof overhang. That's really the only real significant change to the building. So I think that's the presentation I had. So any questions are great.
Deanna Beckman, is that a flat roof?
No.
The roof is what's called a low-pitched roof, and as was pointed out before, it's a low-pitched roof that they put metal roofing on. And they're notorious for lasting, maybe 20 years, but lasting for not that long, and then they fail. And you can't really fix
So
it.
you're gonna pitch it a little bit?
So it does already have a slight pitch, and what we would be putting on would be like a rubber membrane that is warranted for 25 years. It's possible to patch it and to repair it over time, or relatively inexpensive to replace, whereas the metal roofs are not inexpensive to replace.
I worked for 15 years at a school in the board office in New Jersey, and they had flat roofs on all of the buildings. And every year, this one contractor came in and said, well, I'm going to do such and such. And I said to him one day, why don't you pitch it? And he said, this is my summer job. That's why I'm asking.
Anybody else have any questions? I realize we lost a lot of our audience on Zoom. I think, is that correct? Or do we have? Yeah.
About half of my back.
That's unfortunate, there's a storm and technology sometimes breaks down. Anybody else on the floor want to discuss Article 2?
Is this part recorded? Because people could listen to that after.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Anybody else want to weigh in? It was a great presentation, I thought. Yes, sir.
When you put the membrane on, it's going to be on top of the metal, or the metal comes off?
Actually, the metal will stay there, but on top of that.
Is it going to still have the same old heating and cooling problem?
No, because on top of that, you put rigid insulation and then plywood on top of that, and then the membrane roof on top of that.
Okay.
And that's all fastened
Right.
together so that it's a long-lasting solution. That's That's the way low slope roofs are generally in Vermont. I mean, the ones that are decent buildings, that's what they've done.
And is that detailed on the website, on the presentation in the website, that people can go back and look at if they missed it during Zoom?
Well, there's the detailed report that was mentioned, Rick mentioned. It's definitely in that report, but the report is like 30 or 40 pages
When was it put on the website?
It's on the website.
When was it put on?
Months ago.
Months ago, and now it's on, we just.
A month ago?
It's been there.
A couple
I
months
couldn't
time.
find it.
It's in a new place now that the website's all changed. It's in a new section.
Maybe we could do something to try to flag it.
If you give me your email address, I can send it to you.
Bulletin board.
What?
Under bulletin board.
That's the old website. Now it's-
Yes, sir, in the back, new talker, go ahead.
Dave Olster. So at this point, this is just a construction estimate, right? So that's all we're voting on tomorrow?
Yes.
The construction estimate, and then at some point in the future, assuming it's approved, it would go out to bid to construction companies?
Oh, absolutely, correct. What the plan is if we get a positive vote, we will authorize the architect to complete construction drawings. That's going to take a couple of months. Our hope is to bid it, project out by the end of February, complete our contracts with contractors, order materials, do what we can do to prep it in March. As soon as the weather breaks in spring, get started on it and be finished by fall. That's a rough schedule.
My experience with construction estimates and actual bids are that they rarely come in the same. So is there, assuming it were to come in considerably different, would it go to town meeting again for another approval, or?
If it was over, we would have to, if it went over that, plus, we'd have to ask the voters for more money.
Yeah, and I mean, this climate, every builder and architect and anybody else will tell you that the climate is totally unpredictable. We actually just got bids back on a publicly bid $10 million project in Massachusetts. And it originally, the budget was $6 million. We had an estimator done by an estimator. It went up to like $12 million. We then bid it, and actually they just 2 days ago came back at $8 million. So we were actually, I mean, the client was quite happy given what's going on. But that's not a guarantee. I mean, every town is different. I mean, it's a challenging time. So you could be entirely right that it's going to be higher.
Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Patty Harris, when was that bid done? When was the $950,000? Like, what month and what year?
So that's not a bid, that's just sort of an estimate.
Well, when did that estimate come in?
Just recent, 2 months ago, 3 months ago?
It's part of the-
With COVID and the building materials going up.
Those are all important questions in terms of the context of, you know, the overall cost and what the townspeople want to do with the money. And with all due respect to my compatriots here, I was the no vote in terms of voting for option A. I did not vote for option B. I won't go into all the reasons why, but I don't, you know, there's many ways to skin the proverbial cat. So it's not up to me to, you know, decide how you want to proceed with the building. I agree with both of them that we got to do something. I just don't necessarily agree, with all due respect to you, that, you know, the methodology used behind some of the decision-making in terms of some of the technology used. I agree with you that, yes, right now the cost of materials is, you know, stratospheric. It's only going to get worse as we progress. So I would agree with you to say that, you know, the cost is probably going to be higher. I mean, you couldn't intelligently say right now that it's going to be, that it wouldn't be. So you people have to, you know, take all that into consideration when you make your decision. I made mine by not voting for option B, but, you know, Rick has a vast amount, you know, incredible amount of experience in terms of knowing, you know, about construction and what the building needs, and I agree wholeheartedly with everything, you know, that he's trying to do to get it right. It's just a matter of how you want to approach it. I mean, yeah, you said, I was the guy that said, well, you know, looking at the numbers, you know, could you in fact build a new building? I mean, I like to kind of, you know, think outside the box on a lot of things. I mean, you know, theoretically, I mean, the cost might be higher, but, you know, that's another thing to weigh out, you know, when you're going to spend X amount of dollars on a 50-year-old building, does it make sense to spend maybe a little more, or, on a new building, even if it was, we retrofitted things and made it smaller, there's different ways of looking at it. It's just, you got to take all that into consideration when you're making a decision this big. So, that's where I'm at, on an approach in the whole thing.
I would agree. You should assume, if anything, it will go up slightly. And, when our estimators will always put in price escalation.
Sounds like it.
If you wait over time, it's generally not going to get cheaper.
It's not a reason not to do anything, though. I mean, in the concept of, option A was the whole deferred maintenance package of almost 500 grand. I mean, the building at least needs that. You can't have water coming in on Sandy, and, it's just, got to do something, but you got to decide how you want to do the whole thing.
And we can't take it out to bid yet, right? Because we need construction drawings for that, which we assume are going to be, it's going to be expensive to do that. And we didn't think it was a good idea to proceed really without getting a sense of where the voters wanted to go.
But there is an opportunity down the road to shut it down if it came in twice what the estimate was, or something along those lines. So it's not signing up to move forward at this point. It's just, or move forward with the construction. It's just signing up to move forward to get to a point where you have a bid.
That's correct. It's not comfortable spending that kind of money without voters' approval. I can guarantee you that. We're not willing to stick our neck out for those kind of dollars. But I will say this in conclusion: how often do you run across a project with this kind of cost and have the cash sitting there to pay for it? It's like the stars have aligned. I mean, that's just incredible. It just all came to be that way. Most of the people haven't recognized that you had a tax reduction last year, because we took that surplus that we had and we took $200,000 out of it and assigned it right to the general fund for the purpose of reducing taxes. So your taxes went down last year. Now, your overall taxes might have gone up because the state portion went up, but your town taxes went down. And I have a lot of respect for the board that initiated that. That was good. So now we have this project. Now we have the cash in hand. It seems to make a lot of sense that now is the time. But obviously, if we bid it and the bids come in differently, we'll have to circle the wagons and regroup, because we're not going to spend that kind of money without town approval.
And I would also say we are not excited about borrowing money, and there's an analysis in Bill's report about what it costs to borrow money over that same operational period. It just seemed like that did not make a lot of sense to any of us.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it seems like, there's all different kinds of ways to deal with a project, but to end up with a building which is actually to the current standards of a net zero ready building, and actually be reducing taxes, not by a whole lot, but at least it's not a situation where the taxes are going up, to me seems like it's a pretty reasonable deal, and gives you a durable facility, which is as good as any new building out there. But that's just obviously my opinion.
Anyone else? Anyone back on Zoom? Any questions?
We got one from Todd Manise.
Hello.
Hello?
Yeah, Tom, this is Chase.
Yes, Chase, speak.
Thank you very much for letting me speak. I have no opinion, pro or con. I would just like to say that living in this town, having a president from this town, and driving around the state of Vermont, I've seen a lot of really nice town buildings and a lot of really horrible town buildings. I just want to make sure, and I'm sure you guys do too, that we're in for an eye treat on whichever way you decide to go. That's all I have to say, and thank you guys for all your service.
Thank you, Chase. Anyone else from Zoom?
We've got Dana.
Oh,
Speak, Dana.
I thought we were.
Unmute.
Hey, can you hear me? Yes.
Number one,
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Dana Dolph, three things, one of which is the sound quality has been great tonight. That's a big help. I don't know who did it, but it's so much better than in the past. Secondly, having been a taxpayer for like 45 years, it's nice to be invited to speak at one of these meetings, so thank you for that. But my question is, what about the strengthening of the building to handle the snow load? What's involved with that?
Which one of you wants to take that?
I can take that. Basically, we've had structural engineers, I will take the mask off. Our structural engineers did look at that. The building is, if you keep melting the snow, the building structurally is okay and you don't have to, replace the structure. But if you ever really insulate the upper roof, it will have to be reinforced. In this proposal and the work that we did, it includes the engineers doing initial sizing for additional steel structure that would actually have to be put up into the roof so that it can take the snow loads that comply with the current day's code requirements, structural requirements.
Okay, so that cost is in your estimate at this point.
Correct.
Thank you.
Todd Manise?
Thank you for the time. So, our first.
Todd, are you on?
Why can't we see him now?
They don't have video, they're just probably on the phone.
Okay, speak, Todd. We can hear you.
All right, I'm gonna go inside. There's wind chimes going here as the wind gets louder. Bear with me, sorry. So I remember being inside the town hall original building that's right as you enter off 100. And this is a very great improvement. My comments are as a town resident. Some of you know I work in the Vermont Rivers program. I'm not talking as a state employee. Talking as an engineer with 26 years on the consulting side, now 10 years on the state side, and being involved in many of these types of projects. So the return on investment, the option that's recommended, all the different deferred maintenance items. I didn't know that the town employees are dealing with wet floors and mold and mildew, presumably. And having been through this in my engineering career with projects, you get into this phase, you get a opinion of probable cost. There's always a contingency item in that. I've not reviewed that.
Yes.
I really think that this is a very good decision to correct the deferred maintenance issues, make improvements to bring it up to current design standards that constantly change, and we're going to be, as taxpayers, paying less in taxes. And I will say presumably, and I can see what's coming for the environment and the cost savings in that better building efficiency that's proposed. I'm for that. So I talk too much. I could keep going on, but I'm going to mute, shut up, and listen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Todd. Are there any other people on Zoom that want to speak? I do not see them. Anyone else on the floor? If not, I think that was a very good presentation. We're going to go to Article 3. Article 3, to see if the town will approve a short-term rental ordinance. What's this all about?
You all set, Bill? Thank you.
Drive safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, William.
My pleasure. A year and a half ago, a group of residents came to the select board with complaint issues in regards to short-term rental guests. The board agreed to look into this, and once the word got out that the board was considering options, others joined in. I personally received calls, emails, letters in favor of producing an ordinance. The select board decided to form a citizens committee, and I agreed to represent the board on the committee. And our role was to facilitate the process. The board deliberately did not want to take a position one way or the other in regards to the ordinance, but we did want to facilitate the process and help our citizens move forward with options. So the first thing that I did was I went to the Killington Town office and got a copy of their short-term rental ordinance, and then I went to the Woodstock Town office and got a copy of theirs. And both of their ordinances are quite different. Killington's is user-friendly. Woodstock is a lot more restrictive. For example, Woodstock fees and fines are almost double of what Killington's are, and they have a limit on the number of days that you can rent your short-term rental in Woodstock. I think it's 30 days per year. So they're pretty restrictive in a lot of different ways. The Plymouth Committee wanted to be moderate, and they wanted to be user-friendly. After a few meetings, a draft ordinance was prepared, and we had a special meeting. We took in comments, we made some changes based on those comments, and then we sent it out for legal review. We made some more changes. Then we went through a final grammar check, crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and we posted it on the town website. And it's been on there for many, many weeks. When I look at the ordinance, I break it down into two distinct parts: life safety and nuisance complaints. Now let's talk about life safety. Okay, to educate myself on that issue, I called the fire marshal, Jay Moody, out of the Springfield office. And he told me very specifically that as soon as you have a single-family home and you rent one room for compensation, that is now a commercial establishment, and it needs to be treated the same as the Echo Lake Inn, Water's Edge, a bed and breakfast. It's a commercial business when you rent a room for compensation. So they require an application process and a site visit from the fire marshal for all short-term rentals. And they're going to be looking at smoke detectors, CO2 detectors, boiler inspections, second egress from bedrooms, life safety issues. You get 30 days to address the issues. He'll come back and do a repeat inspection, or in some cases, if there are minor issues, he will allow you to self-certify. And he will then issue a CO, a certificate of occupancy, which covers the life safety issues. Now, even if this ordinance does not pass, if you are a owner of a short-term rental, you are required by law to register that with the fire marshal. Now, if you choose to ignore that requirement, think about the liability that you may be exposing yourself to. What if somebody gets injured, hurt, killed, trapped in a fire, just because you didn't change a battery in a smoke detector? Think about the liability that you expose yourself to if you don't follow that process and go through the fire marshal and get a CO. Now, part 2 of this ordinance deals with nuisance complaints, noise, lighting, parking, garbage, septic system design. These are common sense issues and common courtesy issues. So with ownership comes responsibility. And I believe the goal is to get owners to be more responsible for the behavior and actions of their guests. So tomorrow we vote on this ordinance, yes or no, up or down, good or bad, and we'll see where it goes from there. That's
Okay.
all I have for now.
First question? Any questions from the floor? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Mary Jane Cray, and my question is, how are you going to enforce these new rules and regulations should they be passed?
Good question. I've had a conversation with our zoning administrator, Jim Allen, and asked him if he could take on this extra workload. And he said he would, and he could. He's very experienced in zoning issues. And if it came to a point where he had too much work and could not execute the job, we would hire someone part-time, probably to work with Jim as an assistant. It would be a very limited part-time basis, and this would be paid for by the fees in the application process. That was the plan. We're planning, our goal is not to have any expenses to the town as a result of this, and we expect our fees to compensate whoever's going to be responsible for enforcement. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir.
Is Jim gonna go and visit every house
No,
in town?
no,
How is
no.
how is he gonna determine where to go?
We expect to be a voluntary application process. We expect people to come forward who have short-term rentals. We're not going to be,
The homeowners.
yes, we're not going to be knocking on doors and checking on whether you have a short-term rental or not.
Well, if
However, if there
you're
are,
gonna worry about septic systems, you're gonna have to go inside.
well, I'm sorry. If someone has an application and they apply for the short-term rental process, then we will visit, yes, we'll visit then. I thought you were talking about randomly going visit homeowners. No, we won't be doing
You're
that.
relying on the homeowners, to be honest. Is that what
Yes,
you're
we
saying?
are. Yes, we
And
are.
we do have lister cards that indicate the number of septic design and number of bedrooms in the house, right?
It's not a whole lot different, Tom, than somebody with getting a building permit. We expect people to come forward when they're going to build a building. And we expect them to come forward if they're going to have short-term
I
rental.
have 2 properties being built on without any permits yet.
Okay,
ours.
I can't.
I don't know why. I gotta look into that tomorrow or Wednesday.
I don't know.
That's another issue. In the back, wait, Yeah.
Connie Harris, those initial complaints that you received, what, a year or 2 ago, what, were all those complaints, noise complaints, septic complaints, parking complaints, were they all coming from the same short-term rental or short-term rental area?
No.
So it was town-wide?
I can think of 3 locations anyway where
Okay, so it's not like every short-term rental, it's just a handful of them.
that are creating the
That
nuisance
have
problems, you
received
mean?
Complaints.
Okay,
Now, I guess my question is, if this ordinance goes into place and you receive a complaint, what is this fine gonna be like?
okay, it's listed in the ordinance. It depends on what the violation is. There are fines for every day occupying a short-term rental without going through the application process. There are fines for garbage or, they're all listed in the ordinance. And the ordinance is listed on the website, on the town website. But all of those,
I just know when somebody rents something, like through VRBO or Airbnb, and a guest says that they're gonna have 4 people come,
yes,
it's hard for you to control if 8 people come. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well,
No,
you
it's
know,
not.
That's, I mean, the core, the kernel of the ordinance itself is to try and mitigate that. Obviously, if someone rents a place and, yeah, it's me and my girlfriend, and then they bring, 6 other friends with them, and they're in a 2-bedroom house, you don't really, don't necessarily know that as a landlord, but I think, on one hand, this is not something new. Most towns in Vermont, especially tourist towns, are exploring ordinances because, and especially in the last 18 months with the COVID thing, there's been a lot of, rentals, a lot of people coming up seeking, COVID refugees, they call them. On the other hand, there's been a lot of mischaracterization of these ordinances, even ours. This is not to tell people, you can't rent your house, that's not what this is designed to do. It's more or less designed to, again, mitigate the effect that we've been seeing in terms of people that come up and don't necessarily respect their neighbors and respect, the culture of Vermont. People, like, if you read Vermont statute on hotel establishments, I can't come, to your house and, buy a house next door, tear it down, or make a hotel out of it, and have people coming at night, every day, all time, all hours of the day, and parking cars and leaving their garbage out. I can't do that. So if you were in fact renting your domicile out to people that are doing that, there has to be a way for the town to keep a check on that, because it's not every rental and every house, but there have been enough reports and enough complaints, even in my little neck of the woods, that it's going on. There's people coming up to just are running amok. So there has to be some check, especially in a small town like this with no local law enforcement.
What kind of complaints?
Noise complaints, garbage out.
Well, isn't that something that the police or the state or the sheriff has to deal with?
Well,
I mean, it doesn't have to be a short-term rental to be noisy.
We're a town with no law enforcement this week.
Right, but we have noisy people that are not rentals. And how do you deal with that?
Sure, there's all sorts of people, there's all sorts of situations. This particular ordinance is dealing specifically with rentals that turn into what they shouldn't be. They turn into small hotels. And again, you can't create a hotel without going through a hell of a lot of legal,
You're focusing on rentals, but there are other things.
Well, a hotel establishment, there's all sorts of rules, especially, in the state of Vermont.
How many rooms in a hotel?
Well, again, you mentioned Woodstock. Woodstock has a very restrictive ordinance because the hotels in Woodstock.
It's another tax. You're saying you're gonna put another tax on us.
I don't see it as another tax. I see it as
It's a recording fee or something.
Well, as Rick mentioned, I mean, there's so many different layers to this in terms of, it's just the insurance ramifications of it.
Then you're gonna penalize us for things that we probably don't have control over?
I don't know.
I would say we've seen.
I don't understand how you're gonna enforce this. You gotta explain that a little better.
Well, in terms of enforcement, we have a zoning administrator. He's, that's the step.
I know Jim, yes, he's very busy.
He is very busy.
Not an enforcer, he's gonna make sure you fill your application out.
No, that's not true, Tom. We have a complaint form on our website under planning and zoning. All you have to do is fill that out, get it to Sandy, and then it's Jim Allen's responsibility to follow up on that complaint.
Whose?
The zoning administrator, Jim Allen.
Whose responsibility to follow up?
Jim's.
Jim Allen, the
Jim
zoning
Allen?
administrator. He gets copies of the complaints.
Oh, Jim is 150% busy.
I realize that. I understand that. I understand that. But that's why I talked to him and asked him if he could handle the extra workload. And he said he would try to do that. And if not, then we would have to hire somebody else.
So we'll have to pay for hiring somebody else.
Perfect. I'm sorry?
Then we'll have to pay to hire somebody else.
Yes, and it'll be paid for. Tom, it'll be a limited part-time job, and it'll be paid for by the fees from the application process. It won't cost the town any money. That's the plan. Hopefully, everything will work as
I don't
planned.
know, it sounds like it's gonna cost money.
Okay.
In the back?
I'm Jim Tepper. Comment and then a question. I certainly support the life safety element of what this ordinance is intended for. I was part of the Zoom call last in the spring. We looked at the initial application. I now look at the final ordinance. The fee structure has zoomed considerably, as a matter of fact.
Yes, it has.
And seems to go up with the number of rooms. how does that get tied to the cost of just filing this form in the town? It seems significantly high, that's all. And tying into what Tom just said about a tax, it's an extra fee. It also doesn't say whether it's annual or whether it's a one-time fee.
One of the,
I have a question too. I mean, excuse me. It's his turn to answer. You'll be able to talk again.
Okay.
Sorry.
You're correct in saying that the fees went up as the drafts got developed. And the main reason that went up is at the last special meeting, there was a lot of questions about enforcement. So we took that information, went back to the committee, and the committee said, yes, they're correct. We need to figure out how we're going to pay for enforcement. And the way to pay for it was to increase the fees. That's why the fees went up from earlier drafts to the draft that you have now, to make sure we have enough funds in there to pay for enforcement, so we don't have to go to the town and pull it out of general funds. That was the reason for increasing the fees.
Rick?
Yes.
Wait. You have a follow-up on that?
If I could follow up, why wouldn't that expense be covered by the fines you were going to impose on those that choose to violate this ordinance? We're taxing the entire body for the ills of a small percentage.
I'm not sure how to answer that question.
We're hoping there wouldn't be any fines after people comply with the
Yeah,
ordinance, I was thinking, but we don't have a whole lot of zoning violation fees, do we?
No,
Yeah.
no, we do not. No,
So I don't think that would fund it.
no.
Did you have something else to say?
Rick,
Wouldn't the life safety issue apply to everybody in town?
No, because, no.
Why not?
Because you're talking about a single-family resident versus a business, a
Yeah,
commercial
but
business.
that single family should be entitled to safety in their homes as well.
They should, but I don't know how to answer
Yeah,
that
that's an
question.
individual
I
choice.
know it's not an easy
All
question.
I know is it's now a commercial business when you rent a room. That's what I am told.
Yeah. Okay, wait, we have one more person. Todd, do you still have your hand up? Todd?
I don't think he ever took it down.
Okay,
Sorry, I should have lowered my hand. No, I'm all set. Thank you.
okay, good. Yes, sir.
Robert Franny, what is your estimate of the amount of registration fees per year?
Oh, we don't have an estimate. I have no idea. Because I don't know how many short-term rentals are out there.
We don't either,
I'm sorry, I have no idea.
Okay, you didn't
Look on
speak yet?
Airbnb,
Yep.
you'll find out.
I don't know your name, so I'm just pointing.
Right, Jerry. I think I don't remember exactly the number. I remember reading that initially Killington had 75% compliance, and getting that next 25% was a very difficult project, especially since most of those 25% lived elsewhere. It seems to me like you're setting up a policy where the good citizens and well-behavers are paying for the possible sins of the people who will ignore this. If you have somebody in New Jersey, not to say anything against New Jersey, who comes up here once a year and then rents it through Airbnb the rest of the time, he's not going to care less about registering his unit. And that's the person who would probably be the source of problems. And I guess I go back to, do we know whether the houses that have complaints, are those owned by full-time residents of Plymouth, or are they owned by absentee landlords? And I think if that is the problem, absentee landlords, or is it the problem that we have 10 people in a 2-bedroom house? And without that kind of information, it seems like you're setting up a system where the good citizens are paying for the bad citizens.
I agree.
You're absolutely right.
It's a situation.
Yes,
Yes,
to get in.
who's that?
Chase.
It's a Chase. I just want to ask a question. Is there a difference between a present owner and a non-present owner in your presentation?
No,
No.
Somebody that lives on the property is the same as somebody that lives out of state when they rent their house.
That is correct. It is the same.
And I will say, my Airbnb is a building that's on my property.
Mhm.
And it's a completely different situation. I live on this property. So if somebody's making noise, they're bothering me. They're destroying my property. And I'm looking at property completely differently than somebody who's living in Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, who I know they care about their property, but they don't have any vested interest in Plymouth and the neighbors of Plymouth, the citizens of Plymouth.
Part of the
So
goal
that's
is-
what I'm.
Yeah, part of the goal is just to bring them.
Discriminatory to the good citizens compensating for the bad citizens.
We want to bring them to
Okay,
your
not-
standards. We want to bring them to the standard that you hold.
Yes, in the back?
Yeah, my name is Tina Fletcher. One question I've got is that, kind of to follow up on your question, how do we know, how do we address that maybe 25% of folks or something who aren't registering their properties and following the proper protocol? Is there any way that the person who is enforcing these rules could also be proactively looking at listings? I mean, if you go on VBRO or Airbnb, you can search for Plymouth and see who's renting in Plymouth. So it might not be that difficult to find out. I mean, I don't know, I imagine there are several of these sites that might be a little more obscure, but certainly the majority of people are listing on a small number of sites. Is there any plan for someone to spend time just checking through those listings periodically to make sure those folks are registered?
That's a great idea, and that is a good way to do it. Consider this kind of a work in progress. We've never done this before.
Right.
There may be some mistakes, and there may be some changes, and maybe some amendments we have to add to the ordinance, months from now. So we're taking a stab at getting started at an ordinance, and let's see where it goes. There's going to be problems and issues, and we're going to solve them as they come up one at a time.
Well, that's a good point, because this is an example of, changing times we live in. Technology has made it, possible for people to, in a small state and community like this, to insert themselves from very far away. So then it becomes the purview of the town government to try and mitigate what's going on. So the option is not to do nothing, so this is an attempt to try and institute something as other towns are trying to, grapple with the same problem. Or you're renting your place in your backyard, that's fine. I mean, we don't want to try and single you out, but, it's like it's the old proverb, everybody gets caught in the net, to try and to fix a problem. So
If that's the case, then why are we voting on an ordinance? We should be studying.
We should be
Build an
what?
ordinance.
I miss it. We should be what, Tom?
Why are we voting on the ordinance? We should be studying how to build an ordinance.
Oh, we've been talking about this for over a year and a half now, and we've had committee meetings.
Who's we?
Huh?
Who's we?
The committee, the Citizens Committee. We had a special meeting.
I
We had
never
legal
knew
review.
about it.
Planning commission was involved.
Planning commissions had copies of drafts as they've been presented. We've been talking about this a long time. This didn't happen overnight, and I'm pretty tired of it. I want to either vote it up or down and move on.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time getting this far, Tom.
This is our second special meeting on it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I was at the first,
It's the
Yes,
second,
ma'am.
So let me just ask a procedural question. If it were to be voted on tomorrow and accepted as an ordinance to the town of Plymouth, and a year down the road, we find that there are some holes or there are some unnecessary things in it, what's our option then? What happens then? Do we have to go through another whole new ordinance?
This could be a special town meeting to amend
We
the
can amend it,
ordinance.
amend it.
And if the select board isn't responsive enough, it's your right to have a petition and get a percentage of the voters to bring it.
Well, I'm
Yeah,
just
have to
curious
vote,
if,
yeah.
I think it's best to get it out there and see how it works. And if it doesn't work the way you think it's going to, then what's to change?
I agree, 100%. That's the plan. We always have the opportunity
Yes,
to
sir.
amend it.
Different subject, but shouldn't if the life safety issues are covered by Vermont law, should we be duplicating that, or, sounds like a conflict. If that's already a state law, doesn't that end it, or should it be part of this document?
Yes, technically you're right. However, we have a requirement in our application process to get a copy of your certificate of occupancy from the fire marshal, and that tells us we know that piece is done. So part of this application process is when you turn in your application, we need a copy of the CO from the fire marshal. So we're not telling you, you need to do those things. You need to do those things, complete this application.
Who's gonna make the, if you register your house as an Airbnb renter, what kind of fees are you going to assess the owner?
Oh, it's in the application. I'll have to, I don't know. I forget what they are.
I think I got it right here. It's 200 per bedroom and
Yeah.
per person, 100 for each bedroom.
Okay, 200
But what if you
initial.
don't rent out of your house, you have a residence? Not a room.
A separate residence, yeah. Would it be based on the initial fee plus the number of bedrooms?
I think it's $200 initial fee plus $100 for each additional bedroom.
And a $40 recording fee.
Oh, yeah, $40 recording fee
One time or every year?
annually. Annually.
You'll get a chance to vote on this tomorrow. Anyone else in the Zoom meeting?
Yeah, there's somebody.
Arthur?
Arthur, okay, that's a hand up, that counts. Hi, Arthur, speak.
I'd just like to say that I am 100% in favor of the town getting a hold of the problem. The town that I live in here on Long Island, we thought we had a problem. We hired a company to do surveillance of the short-term rental housing. We thought we had 50 houses. It turned out we had 205. And this was a company that does scraping of websites to determine which houses are actively being offered for rental. And I think you have to understand your problem before you really can even begin to deal with it. I am supportive of an ordinance. I'm happy to pay for my 4-bedroom house the $540 annually. I think I'm pretty much up to code with the fire, but I would obviously have the marshals come and take a look at it. The only thing that I would not want to do is I would not want to be limited to something like 30 days. You know, I don't get to come up to Vermont as much as I used to. We don't ski any longer, so, you know, we come up 6 times a year, 7, 8 times a year maybe. And we love Plymouth, and we've owned our house there. My mother first bought it in 1963. We've been through 2 floods with it. We love it. The only thing is, if there was a problem with my house with, you know, rowdy guests or cars parked all over the place, how would I get to know this?
From your neighbors.
Do you have a property manager or somebody that overlooks your house when you're not there?
Yeah, I have the company that does the rentals for me is a company called Vacasa. And, you know, you would notify them, I guess.
Yeah.
And I have Andy Crossman looks after the house for me on, you know, snow plowing and handyman repairs.
There is a requirement that if you have a property manager, that he's listed in the application, so we have someone we can contact when there is a complaint. We need someone locally that we can call to register a complaint. Now, let me say one thing while I'm thinking of it. You talked about you're hoping that we wouldn't limit the number of days per year. And I want you to know that the committee talked about that because we know Woodstock does that. and we debated it and decided that that would be too restrictive. And we decided against that deliberately. So I wanted you to know that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Tom, can I
Anybody-
jump in again?
Who's that?
Chase?
It's Chase.
You didn't raise your hand, Chase. Huh?
I swear I did.
Okay, we'll make an exception this time. Don't do it again.
Thank you. I'll be counting the votes tomorrow, but you know, this is going to open up the can of worms of fire extinguishers in the house if it's a commercial property. I just want everybody to realize that.
That would be probably a requirement that the fire marshal would dictate, correct?
Yeah, no, I understand the dictate and the fire marshal. I'm just saying that that's going to open up Pandora's box as soon as you do it.
Okay.
Thank you, Chase.
Thank you, Tom, for all your service.
Anyone else on our Zoom meeting have another question? Anyone else on the floor? I think you guys did a fine job of presenting that. If there are no further discussion or questions, I'm going to gavel this meeting closed. That's my part. Continue talking forever.
Thank you,
Still
Tom.
a select meeting,
Appreciate it.
the open meeting. Part. That was really well done, guys.
Thank you.
By the way, if you can still hear me, the electricity's back on.
Thank you, Chase. Are you going to follow me home on this Zoom meeting?
No, Tom, I know better than that.
It's amazing.
Tom, you better look on the
It's not just Zoom, it's
Like smile.
No, I gotta make sure.
That's right.
Are you gonna stay till like midnight?
Just to be out of here. All I have to do is go home.
He does.
Doing good until he fell.